Amnesia the Bunker came out, I think it's 5 days ago now. And as I was wrapping that game up, I started to think that maybe I would want to do an MP3 on it, which is what I'm doing right now. But I also have never done a formal review of a frictional game before. And these games are massively important to me. I consider myself a very large frictional fan. Even though their back catalog is a bit of a mixed bag for me, but they've made some of my favorite games ever. And I think that my experience with their catalog of games will inform my my review of The Bunker. And so, yeah, I'm just going to kind of go through everything they've done. I will start out by saying that I will have no spoilers for any of their games, except for The Bunker, and I will give you a clear spoiler warning when I get into Bunker spoilers late in this MP3 or whatever you want to call this thing that I'm making. I guess technically you could call it a review, but I just don't. I still don't like calling these MP3s reviews in general. So it's a weird word for me. I don't know. This is just, these MP3s are places for me to dump my thoughts. So I might just have to start. I might just have to give up and just start calling them MP3s confidently because I can't think of a better all-catching term for them. But yeah, The Bunker overall, very good game. I liked it quite a bit. On a 0 to 5 scale, I would give it a 4. It's very nice. I actually glutted it in 2 sittings. I had one 7-hour sitting the night of Wednesday the 7th, and then I had a 6-hour sitting the night of Thursday the 8th. This is Japan time because I'm currently studying abroad in Japan. But yeah, it was great. I enjoyed it very much. It was not exactly what I was hoping for from the next frictional game. I will elaborate on that later, but I kind of was hoping for one thing. I got something else instead, but the something else was still very good. So yeah, I'm just going to go really quickly. I'm just going to gloss over all the previous frictional games, talk about my experience with them, my thoughts on them. This whole thing here, you also might consider it like a love letter to frictional games in a sense. I think I did mention already, this isn't my first take, so I forget if I've said this or not, but the Frictional Games back catalog is a bit of a mixed bag for me. So at times this might seem like a tough love letter in a sense, but I assure you that, yeah, I'm a big fan of Frictional Games, and the best of their catalog has seriously been some of the best ever for me, and I very much am very happy, thankful for their games in general. Like a lot of people, I started out with The Dark Descent, obviously. I think that most people who are into frictional games probably were exposed to frictional through The Dark Descent. I love the story and the gameplay very much. I thought the monsters were excellent, and they hold up very well on subsequent playthroughs. More so than any other game in the franchise, actually. I think the monster encounters hold up very nicely. And that's partially because the lore behind the monsters is very good. Again, I don't want to get into spoilers for it, but I think that the nature of the monsters, what they are, is nice and holds up pretty well in subsequent playthroughs. And if you know about like the origin of the monsters, there is some connection to the origin of the monsters in Rebirth and in The Bunker. There is some consistency with how the monsters come into being, but I still think that Amnesia, The Dark Descent specifically, does it a lot better than the other ones. Again, I don't have enough thoughts on this to warrant getting into spoilers for more than one game, but yeah, and the Dark Descent monsters, definitely the best. The audio they play when the monsters are chasing you was also very good. It's unforgettable that sound it plays when the monster is aggroed. But yeah, very good game in general. I love the story. I think that the story about Daniel is very good, and I'll get into that a little more later on in this in this thing. But yeah, Amnesia is great. Love it very much. I did, in preparation for this review, actually, I did play The Dark Descent again just last night. I played it from the beginning all the way up to where you drain the water to get it on the stairs where the fungi are. And yeah, it was still great. The whole time, I was just like, man, I love this game. So yeah, I liked The Dark Descent so much. After my first time, I went back and played a little bit of the Penumbra tech demo. I still haven't gotten very far into that. And shortly after starting that, I switched over to Overture. I played it and Black Plague. I liked them both very much. I think that the ending of Black Plague was a little lackluster. The kind of tone shift near the end I did not like very much. But that's only the very end of the game. I think in general, they were both very enjoyable. The stories are not quite as solid as like The Dark Descent or as Soma, but they were minimal enough that I was able to just enjoy the journey and the gameplay. And it wasn't so much the narrative that I cared about in those games as much as like my experience of just getting from A to B and overcoming the challenges along the way, right? I did not like Penumbra Requiem or Amnesia Justine, so I'm going to kind of gloss over those, get to the more interesting stuff. They were both kind of just like add-ons anyway, right? So it's not even really very important if I enjoyed them or not, in my humble opinion, because they were just... Requiem was tacked on to Black Plague and Justine was tacked on to Dark Descent, and they were kind of designed to offer something different, maybe even to inspire custom stories, right? So in that sense, I could see how branching out tonally may have been a good thing for those, but I did not enjoy them very much in a bubble. Machine for Pigs was also a disappointment for me. The gameplay being streamlined wasn't necessarily a deal breaker, but it did kind of... I mean, this is a common criticism of A Machine for Pigs, where it was more like a story that you kind of walked through and felt much less game-like because you had the unlimited light. Sanity didn't really matter. There were more events that felt more like on-the-nose scripted. Like the straightforwardness of the scripted parts of Machine for Pigs, I think, was greater than in Dark Descent. It definitely felt more scripted, more linear than The Dark Descent. I know it was the Chinese room and just published by Frictional, but still with it being part of the... published by Frictional and also being in the Amnesia franchise, I figured it was worth bringing up. But still, I was excited for Soma because, it was finally a new game being developed by Frictional, so I was very much looking forward to Soma. I was hoping that it would come through and deliver another great story like The Dark Descent was. And it did. Yeah, Soma was excellent. The story was wonderful. I slurped up every drop of the dialogue between Simon and Catherine, the character interactions. I loved the pace, the atmosphere. I'll never forget just the experience of walking around on and like using the Omni tool to go in and out of the pressurized entrances. Yeah, it was just a very memorable experience, a very good story. The rummaging, the exploration, and just like the primary narrative were all just so good. I love Soma. I was kind of surprised at how much flack it got for being a little bit less scary than The Dark Descent. And it was. Soma is less viscerally scary than The Dark Descent. But I really feel like that stigma... I would not be surprised if that stigma was heightened by the flack it may have gotten from like YouTuber idiots who were bummed out that there was less stuff to overreact to in Soma. The story was still very good. And I think that like the story of Soma, I think, disturbed me more than The Dark Descent did. Like, as good as The Dark Descent was, Soma's story was like, I don't know, it was so good at creating like a visceral experience of like, not immediate terror, but just like I don't know. I didn't put a whole lot of thought into describing this well, but yeah, Soma's story was very good, very memorable. And I was surprised that they were able to, I don't know, I think it's nice that they created such a great story under a whole new IP, right? Like, Soma really brought more of what I loved about The Dark Descent without needing to lean on the previous IP, which I was very impressed by. I was like, God damn, this is an awesome story. And I was just so excited for the next Frictional game, which, of course, was Rebirth. So I was very much looking forward to that. Rebirth is the first one that I pre-purchased, I think. I don't think I pre-purchased Soma, I forget. I can't remember how much Maybe I was. I feel like I must have pre-purchased Soma because I was looking forward to it beforehand. I remember having that that short released with like the redhead working on the terminal and how excited I was for the new Frictional game. But yeah, I pre-purchased Rebirth on GOG. Unlike Soma, I did not look at any of the marketing for Rebirth because I liked Soma so much that I wanted to go into Rebirth as blind as possible. So I pre-ordered on GOG. I didn't watch the trailers. I didn't look at screenshots. Then the game eventually came out. It had a Linux version, which ran very poorly, and I had to switch back to the Windows version, which was very disappointing. That might explain why the bunker does not have a Linux version, which is kind of sad. I really would like to see Linux versions as well. But from a small studio, honestly, as long as they get a good game out, I'm willing to run it on Wine or Proton or whatever, if I got to in the meantime, This time I did, while I was studying abroad in Japan, I am using Windows more than Linux. So I just played the bunker on Windows. But anyway, Linux version wasn't very good, so I switched back to Windows. Not as big a deal as the other factors in the game. I did enjoy the Rebirth still had like the rummaging puzzle-solving gameplay that I enjoy very much. I don't remember it very vividly, but I do remember thinking that that I enjoyed the general, you go to a hub, you explore around, you solve some puzzles, you open drawers. I love that gameplay, honestly. And so that part was still very solid for me. The story, on the other hand, was not very good in Rebirth. I disliked it very much. It was very murky, and I just really had nothing. There's nothing to the story that I was interested in or cared about. In particular, I disliked Tazi quite a bit. She was difficult to relate to. She talked too much. She was always falling and losing progress, which was so annoying. And which I split the blame for that between Tazi and just the writer in general, right? Even it is all the writer at the end of the day, but you know what I mean. But yeah, as the game progressed, I slowly got more and more anxious over how shaky the story seemed, and I was unsure about that. And I became more annoyed with Tazi over time as she just kept talking, and I just didn't care about anything that was happening. Now, did she actually talk too much? I'm not sure. Simon and Catherine didn't feel like they talked too much in Soma, and they talked quite a bit. But of course, that Soma also had, because of the nature of Simon and Catherine's relationship, you had points where it was the dialogue heavy, and then you had points where you felt very alone, and you were just kind of rummaging. And I think that contrast worked very well for Soma's pacing. I really can't understate how great Soma meshed its good story and its gameplay were woven together so well. And Rebirth did not have any of that. So did Tazi actually talk too much? I don't remember. I didn't bother counting lines or comparing directly. There were just some serious writing and narrative problems in Rebirth. So I had a generally negative impression of that game. But yeah, so after playing Rebirth, I looked back and I was I felt like, okay, the writer definitely has to be different, right? Because it just was, I disliked it so much. Who wrote this game? I don't remember who it was, but I did look up and find out that Mikhail Hedberg, I hope I'm saying that close to correct. Mikhail Hedberg was the writer for The Dark Descent and for Soma. And those were the two games that I really liked. And he was involved before that. He did some additional writing for Black Plague, I think. I didn't check Overture. But he was the writer. He was the guy for Dark Descent, for Soma. So I didn't really know what Hedberg's story was, why he didn't write Rebirth. I was kind of worried that maybe Frictional had lost Hedberg, and that the best Frictional games were behind us, and we'd never reach that height of Dark Descent or of Soma again. But then I heard The Bunker was coming out a few years later, and so I looked at the credits, and I saw, okay, well, Thomas Grip is creative director, and he's always done a great job. And Mikhail Hedberg is back writing, so awesome. Hopefully this game will will be another good one to add to the Dark Descent and to Soma, because I'm still waiting for another game to recapture those two. At the point of hearing about the bunker, I'm still waiting for the next good frictional game after Soma. So yeah, seeing that Hedberg was back, it made me very optimistic. So once again, I pre-purchased on GOG. I did not watch any trailers. I didn't look at any screenshots. I just waited for the game to come out. And like really all that I had seen when I launched the game on my PC, all I had seen was the official art that shows the monster, and it also shows the revolver. So I knew that you were going to have a gun in this game, and I knew that there was a monster, and that's about it. So yeah, I'm pleased that I did that. So overall, I mean, I would say that overall my love of frictional games is rooted in my love of the Dark Descent and of Soma, right? The exploring, rummaging, puzzle solving, all that. I think I already said that, but yeah, that's and the story all kind of meshing together is really important. It's not even really that important to me that it's scary. The games being scary are almost like a byproduct of them being good and effectively telling a story, right? But in the case of like Soma, for example, where it's less viscerally scary, I don't even care. As long as the story is good and it makes me think, I'm a fan. And so, let me see here. An important thing about the Dark Descent and Soma that made them... But before getting into we'll talk about the bunker specifically very soon. I did want to say that for the Dark Descent and Soma, I think the thing that makes those two games stand head and shoulders above the rest for me is I think that they're particularly good because both Daniel and Simon, the main characters of those games respectively, they both have like a real here and now story that happens to them inside the game, and it is a story that is worth retelling. Like I could summarize these game stories for my friends, and I feel like they're interesting and a story that is worth telling, right? But they both do a really good job at making these main characters easy to relate to. Like from the first moments of the Dark Descent, you play as the new amnesiac version of Daniel, and right from the get-go, like we know everything Daniel knows, right? We want to understand the past events. We want to know the reasons that the original Daniel drank the amnesia potion. We want to know who Alexander is. We want to know if killing him is the right thing to do. Like, there's no presupposition from Daniel in the game. Like, he and I are on an even keel. We know we have the same information. And present Daniel doesn't really talk very much. And it kind of allows me, like present Daniel is me, right? And that's why that story works so well, I think, is because they managed to make the character basically an empty vessel for me to project myself into. And however I feel about the story, it works in the context that I'm given, in the framework that I'm given. And the past is interesting, and I want to explore it because it's relevant to what I'm doing right now. Soma also accomplishes this very well. I actually vividly remember thinking that I was impressed at how well they created a similar kind of excellent story without using amnesia as a plot device, right? Like, because at the start of the game, we're told about Simon's illness with his brain hemorrhaging problems. And whether you latch onto that or not, whether you care when you go into the clinic, is really irrelevant. Because we and Simon get spirited away to this strange place. And whether or not you care about Simon's illness, it doesn't really matter, because it is technically a detail. But what matters in the here and now is, where the hell am I? What is this place? What's happening? And the answers to all those things are excellent. And yeah, so Simon does have more of a personality than Daniel. And I've heard some people be a little critical of that, where it's harder to insert yourself into a character like Simon, who has more of a personality. I agree. I understand that how that might be a criticism. And we do kind of stand in like a liminal space between being Simon and being ourselves, more of an observer to Simon's story, right? We're not really one or the other. It's kind of a little ambiguous there. But the story comes together so well that this really did make a big difference for me in the end. I really think that Soma's story is very effective, and I liked it very much. Which of course brings us now to the bunker. And I can still say a little more about the bunker before going into the spoiler territory. I think the focus on gameplay instead of story this time is an interesting choice. The bunker is one of the most minimized narratives in Frictional's catalog, if not the most minimized, I think, in terms of like the here and now narrative that happens to you inside the game. I think it's very, very by a fair margin, actually. It's the least robust of all the Frictional games, even the Penumbra games. My Discord. I hope that Discord notification isn't too loud for you. And so yeah, it's let me see here. Sorry, my notes are just too long here. What story there is had very little effect on what I did or how I felt during the bunker. Except when it annoyed me at a few points, but that was not a huge factor in the game or anything. Jesus Christ, Discord. Okay, hold on. I'm just going to go into streamer mode. I'm just going to quit Discord. Quit Discord completely. There you go. But yeah, and now my fucking phone's vibrating. All right. But yeah, so not to say that the notes and stuff were useless in this game, or that they should be skipped. I am kind of interested in knowing, or I was interested in, was and still am. The past events are worth exploring, but and they also have valuable gameplay clues in them, and the story that happened in the past, contextualizing parts of the environment that you work in, it does make the bunker feel very real and lived in a good way. But the end result is, it really does not create a story that's like worth retelling over a campfire or anything, right? I think that if we were sitting around a campfire and I told you the stories of the Dark Descent and of Soma, I think that I could have you sitting on the edge of your log for the whole time, for both of those stories, right? The bunker, not so much. It really is not that memorable as a narrative, right? The past events just kind of feel like details. Nothing very interesting happens in terms of the scripted narrative or the result of the writing, right? There's not really much interesting that happens in the course of the gameplay. But it still created a really memorable experience. And this reminded me of the Penumbra games in a way, actually. How, I mean, like personally, and I haven't played either of the Penumbra games in quite a while. I think I revisited Overture, the first commercial game, maybe a couple years ago. I didn't beat it, but I just played through a bit of it. And I really enjoyed, when you think about Penumbra, right? You think about going through this spider tunnel in Overture. You think about the monster encounters in Black Plague. I don't want to get too specific, but you know what I mean? That you remember the experiences and the set pieces, and not even set piece. When I say set piece, it sounds like a Call of Duty cutscene. But you know what I mean? Like the environments where specific things happen, right? You remember being introduced to a new kind of monster, or like trying to solve a particular puzzle. That stuff is very memorable in Penumbra. Like Philip's story, I really don't remember it very much in hindsight. I remember at the beginning of the first game that he's like looking for his dad, and that we learn some stuff along the way. And I know the third game never really came, so like the story was like incomplete because we never got the third game in the trilogy. I don't think the third game would have changed my mind about that, because in 2 games I still didn't care that much about Philip's story, right? It was fine as a framing device for your journey through the bunkers, which, I mean, you were literally in bunkers in Penumbra, and Amnesia the bunker is, you're in a bunker, and it reminds me very much of Penumbra in terms of structure. I would like to know if that was deliberate, if the bunker was deliberately sort of trying to evoke Penumbra with its narrative and game design, because it felt very much like that. And it was good. I really enjoyed it very much. Before going into the spoiler stuff for the bunker, I should mention a few technical things. Some people have commented on how the graphics aren't exactly cutting edge in the bunker. And this did not bother me one singular bit. Not at all. I've been saying for a while that I wish games would focus more on gameplay and just not even bother chasing the ultra-high resolution graphics and making an otherwise technically simple game into a lumbering nightmare of code, right? And assets. I think The Bunker has great art direction, and that is like all it needed to look great. I appreciated that very much, actually. I'm pleased that the art direction is good, the gameplay is good. They do exactly what they need to do with the right amount in terms of like art direction and the technical side, and I thought that was all very good. There are some technical rough edges that I hope will be patched that really should have been fixed by day one. I hope that they fix them later. There is frequent noticeable loading stuttering with a little loading icon in the corner of the screen, and these load zones are like in the most disruptive places possible. I have a 5th generation Ryzen 7 with 32 gigabytes of Corsair Vengeance RAM and an Asus TUF 3080, and these stutters are still very noticeable, very distracting. And there were consistent audio issues with the... And I don't want to get too descriptive, actually, in the audio issues, but I'll talk about that more in the spoiler section. But yeah, there were some parts of the audio kind of felt like rough edges to me. Some of it may have been deliberate in order to disorient you, but other parts I suspect may have been just technical problems with the audio. I don't know if it's the result of maybe they built their audio system in-house, and so it has some shortcomings compared to things like Counter-Strike, for example. I don't know. But yeah, that is something that stuck out to me. All that being said, it's still a great game. I highly recommend playing it yourself. I genuinely think that The Bunker is too good to skip, so I would say look at as little of the promotional material as you can, where you can pick up the game in good conscience. If you feel like you need to watch the trailer or something, then do what you have to do. But personal recommendation, just don't look at anything and buy it. I think it's easily worth $25. Very, very fun and good game. Get it on GOG if you want to show some support for DRM-free gaming, which I care about very much. I'm very happy that it's available on GOG. But, you can still get it on Steam if that's what you're into. That's totally fine. But yeah, I think that's enough to give you the gist without spoiling anything. So I'm going to start talking about spoilers now. And again, I'll only be spoiling The Bunker, but I'll be spoiling it very thoroughly. So no spoilers for any other Frictional games, but if you haven't played The Bunker, I strongly recommend that you buy it, give it a try. I think there's a very good chance that you will enjoy it, and if you don't, it's definitely just an interesting game to play, just for conversation purposes. But yeah, here we go. We're going into spoiler territory now. Let's elaborate on the technical issues first, just in case anybody happened to... Maybe you wanted to know more about the technical stuff, so you pushed through into spoilers. Let's just get that out of the way first. The positional audio for when the monster is climbing around in the walls was sometimes a little misleading. I don't know if that was on purpose or not, but sometimes it was distracting with how strange the positional audio sounded. I don't know if this is because, I think I mentioned this already, but the positional audio, I don't know if it was built in-house or what the deal is, but you compare it to Counter-Strike. I play a lot of Counter-Strike, and in my headphones I can usually get a really good idea of what direction a guy is in just from from stereo positional audio, right? In The Bunker, sometimes it's very confusing, where I can't tell if it's on the same level as me, or if it's in this room or one room over, what direction it is. It really feels very much like the monster is teleporting a lot and not moving smoothly between 2 points. This is especially problematic when I'm leaving the soldier quarters, and the monster will be right behind me, and I'll go up the spiral staircase, and I will clearly hear the monster right in front of me on the same floor as me. But he just won't be there, and I don't know what's up with that. I don't know if the positional audio is just playing... Maybe the only information the positional audio contains is that he's in front of me and out of the wall. So maybe in front of me and out of the wall sounds the same, regardless of whether he's down in the soldier's quarters or up beside the armory storage or mission storage, whatever that place is called with the lockers. I don't know, but it was distracting. And also, all the main rooms, their bottleneck that returns you to the hub is where the loading seam is. And so many of my, like the chases where I'm running from the monster, the last leg of the chase isn't over, but the last leg of it is interrupted by a loading stutter, which oftentimes, like, the lighting resets. Maybe I'm winding my flashlight when I cross that barrier, which is kind of distracting and buggy. And oftentimes it feels like the monster will teleport when it loads, which again feels strange. I don't know how much of this, maybe some of it was kind of intentional and they weren't expecting people to think about it very carefully, but I did think about it carefully, and it was kind of noticeable. Didn't ruin the game by any means, but those were all the technical problems that I noticed. Let me see here. I know I had more to say about the sandbox too, but I think that's later. But in general, the cat and mouse gameplay with the monster was very good. It was very tense, especially early on. It took me almost 2 hours to get hit by the monster because I was just creeping around and being so careful. Being let loose in a giant area and being able to like plan things and how I'm going to tackle the challenges was very fun. I love the progression of my experiences where at the beginning I would be sitting in my safe hub room for several minutes at a time sometimes, just kind of like looking at the map, thinking about what I want to do. I'm so worried about running out of fuel. There's this ticking clock element that makes me feel so helpless and trapped. And over time, as I was exposed to the monster and became more desperate, I got braver. And I eventually sort of transitioned from being afraid to do anything to having almost no fuel, saying fuck it and charging out into the dark and just sort of like acting out of desperation. Almost transitioning into becoming a creature of the night myself, actually, where at first I was afraid of running out of fuel, and I got to the point where I was comfortable navigating in the dark with just my flashlight, like darting in and out of rooms to avoid the monster. And yeah, none of this was really like part of the story, the written narrative, but the game design really facilitated this really nice experience of tackling this challenge of exploring the bunker and finding a way out. Oh, here we go. Yeah. So this is the thing I was looking for before. The game does say if you think something is possible, it probably is, and it kind of lets you know that it has these sort of like immersive sim elements where you can tackle challenges in more than one way, which is a little misleading because it really doesn't have like a true sandboxy kind of feel to it. It really feels like that tooltip is a kind of a misguided way of describing that some obstacles can be tackled with more than one silver bullet item. The wine cellar is a great example of that because you cannot blow the grate open with a grenade, you cannot shoot through the chain, but you can get into the bottle storage either by cutting the chain or by using the wrench to take the grate off. So I think that's kind of what they were trying to say, is there's more than one way to tackle things, but it still sounds more lofty than the game actually is, and that disappointment, well, for example, in the prisoner quarters, when you get to that room where you can see the key the key sign above that locker, above that cabinet, and so I tried to burn that door down. I actually saw there's an explosive barrel just inside the door too, and I was planning my resource use very carefully. So I was like, okay, if I throw a Molotov at the window of this door, then either the door will burn down or I'll set that explosive barrel off, and one of those two ways I'll get in, right? I didn't want to try shooting the explosive barrel. That seemed way too reckless. So yeah, I threw the Molotov at the window. It burned up. The barrel did not explode. The door did not burn away. And then I pulled my revolver out and I tried shooting out the lock, and that didn't work either. And so that sequence right there really caused me to lose faith in the if you think something is possible, it probably is aspect of it. And that disappointment and kind of feeling cheated by that, it kind of created this mental block where it took me a little bit longer than I should have, I think, to realize that you can break down wooden doors with frag grenades. The frag grenades, I don't remember if I tried it on the grate or not. I don't think I did. I read someone talking about trying it on the grate though after I finished the game. But yeah, so the frag grenades don't work on the grate. You can't burn the wooden doors down. You can't shoot locks out. You can't shoot chains out. And so it never really even occurred to me to throw a frag grenade at a wooden door. It almost makes frag grenades feel like a key item, right? Like one of the pre-planned key items, where I wish that they would have considered every barrier against every item, right? Like, okay, if they try to burn a wooden door down with a Molotov, what happens? I don't think that nothing is the right choice if you want to emphasize experimentation and creativity, right? But yeah, it took me about 8 hours of gameplay, 8 hours out of 13, to realize, like, oh, I can frag open doors. So that definitely put a damper on my progression. And how I realized they could break doors down was I was actually in the prison level, and the monster came in and broke the wooden door down, giving me access to the Roman tunnels. And I was like, oh shit, that can't be the only way to get in there. So can I just break these doors down? What would work? Would a frag work? And then I try to frag, and that's when I realized, like, oh, okay, so I can break these doors down. You just can't shoot through the locks or burn them down arbitrarily. And that was kind of weird. I understand completely. I think that loading screen tip should have been rephrased. I think that it sounded a little too ambitious for what this game is. I do understand that you don't want to over-tutorialize things and kind of take away the fun of the experimenting. So it's not easy to balance those two things, but I do think that the way that it is now does kind of set the player up for disappointment if they try the wrong thing when trying to take these barriers down. But yeah, regarding the story, because Hedberg wrote it, I was hoping to get another story like The Dark Descent or like Soma. It was more minimal, and also not that interesting or memorable immediately, right? It was not immediately interesting or memorable in terms of the story, right? Like I was constantly absorbing the story. I wasn't like frustrated during, but then once I got to the end and big picture, I didn't really care that much. You know what I mean? I was still kind of waiting for the story to get started, and it sort of never did. Now, that being said, I definitely prefer a minimal story, like in The Bunker, over a bad story, like in Rebirth. So even though this game was not exactly what I wanted, I still think that they made the right choices when they were kind of putting together this. It feels like they had the idea of, okay, let's just have a gameplay-focused Amnesia that focuses more on the visceral experience of conquering like a hub filled with puzzles while being chased by one monster, right? And I think that they executed that very well. I still think that the story could have used the punch up. Maybe another pass over the story and the game design to kind of interweave them a little better. But I think that what The Bunker does well, it does very well. And I don't think that the story in The Bunker is bad. I just think that it doesn't matter very much. And so I'm sure that I did not dig into it and understand all the minutia of the story, but I get the gist of it. And the story, as I understand it, is I don't even remember the main character's name. Whoever the main character is, I play as this guy. I had my buddy
Lambert,
or whatever the hell my friend's name was. So the main character bamboozles his buddy he cheats at gambling, presumably using like loaded dice or something. There were dice in my locker, and so I presumed that I was using loaded dice to cheat my buddy or something like that. But anyway, you cheat your buddy in a game of chance, which results in him having to take the watch that night or do the patrol or whatever. And he falls down a hole. You go to save him, and he ends up drinking the water in that hole, which mutates him. It causes him to start mutating, which not only gives him the strength to carry you back to the bunker, but also causes him to mutate further and eventually become the monster. And yeah, and I mentioned before that there was a connection between The Dark Descent and Rebirth. The monsters that do come from humans is usually the result of drinking something. I'm not even saying which monsters those were, but yeah. So it seems like this could be the same substance in a way. Going over my notes again here. But yeah, so it could be the same substance. I don't know. The universes in the Amnesia games being like loosely connected doesn't really do anything for me. This game really feels like it didn't have to be an Amnesia game, right? And the Amnesia itself really did not contribute to the experience at all. The experience is, I'm trapped, I need to get out, and there's a monster, right? That is the experience of this game. And it could not be farther removed from the story in the past, right? I mean, you and the monster have the history as back when he was your buddy, right? So there is like a history there, but that's still, you still can get the core experience of solving the puzzles, running from the monster. It doesn't matter that much, the story, right? Hey, Future Jim here. I'm currently doing the editing pass for this little MP3 thing, and I completely forgot to mention that another aspect of the story that made things feel more minimal for me was how it was very much the big picture story. Even the story told in gameplay, if I was like to recount not my moment-to-moment experiences, but the actual story that was told through gameplay alone, it is still very minimal and straightforward, right? You're trapped in a bunker. Your buddy tells you, hey, you need to get some dynamite and blow the rebel away. And that's how you'll get out. And then they show you the bunker, the area you have to explore. It's your hub plus 4 areas. So you explore the areas. The expectation is, I explore 4 areas, I use the dynamite, and then the game ends. And that's true. You don't get out like you were expecting, but it really is like the exact scale. Like they show you the scale outright from the start. You literally like go to the armory and get the dynamite. You go into the Roman tunnels and get the handle, and that's it. Then the game's over. And then you have the encounter with the beast, which basically it results in the same ending, regardless of whether you kill him or realize that you can jump out and spare him. It's the same ending regardless. For the record, I did kill him because I gave the beast the doll. As soon as I found it, I went to the storeroom and I got him to come out and gave him the doll, and he calmed down until I used the TNT. But then we got into the arena and he wanted to kill me again, and so I was just like, all right, have it your way. And I just like waited until he was hanging on a ledge and shot him right in the face with the shotgun. But yeah, I also didn't mention how it was weird that I didn't get the shotgun until right at the end of the game. Maybe some people got it earlier, but I got the shotgun immediately before using the dynamite, and I only had 1 shell, and I blasted that 1 shell into the beast's face to kill him, and then that was it. There's another shell hidden under 2 boards in the final fight, and I didn't even find that. So that was really strange how the shotgun shells were advertised to me in the lockers at the start of the game, and it literally ended up being 1 shell that I could use however I wanted, and I just used it on the monster like that. I'm sure some people will find the shotgun earlier in their playthroughs. That's a result of the randomization, but it definitely had a strange end result. But yeah, I think that's all that I missed. So let's just go back to the original recording. Part of me wonders if Frictional feel trapped by the Amnesia brand. They call their game Amnesia, and so they kind of have to have Amnesia in the title whenever they go back to this like Lovecraftian, Cyclopean kind of horror stuff. There has to be Amnesia in the story somehow. And I wonder if they feel kind of like how Hideo Kojima did with Metal Gear. I feel like I remember hearing that Hideo Kojima didn't want to call the franchise Metal Gear, that was like a marketing thing, and so he wouldn't have had the Metal Gears in every game. But if the game's called Metal Gear, you gotta have a walking tank in there at some point. And I kind of wonder if Amnesia is the Metal Gear of the Amnesia franchise. You know, Amnesia, the concept, is the Metal Gear, the robot of the Amnesia franchise. Yeah, I wonder. But yeah, all in all, The bunker definitely feels more like a vignette in the Amnesia universe rather than like another story, right? It's just kind of like a little, difficult to articulate that perfect. I think a vignette is a good word for that, though. It is like a vignette game. It did create a very good and memorable experience for me, just sheerly through the gameplay and exploring the bunker. It's funny that I bought this game, or I probably would have bought it regardless. I'm going to buy the next Frictional game without looking at the marketing material, because even the games that are bad, or the games that I dislike strongly, like Rebirth, I'm still happy that Frictional are just a small studio doing what they think is interesting. I hope we don't have another Rebirth, but especially after the bunker, they definitely still have some genuine good ideas. They're still very talented people, and I am willing to gamble on the next game. Even if I don't like it, I'm willing to gamble on the next Frictional game because this game was still very good. I really want to see what they do next. And let's see, I already mentioned that. I do still hope that we'll see another game like on the same level as The Dark Descent or as Soma in terms of storytelling. But I would welcome another vignette-style game. It doesn't really need to be like an Amnesia story or a Soma story. I could take or leave both of those things. What my gut says right now is that the Amnesia brand is kind of tired. Like, even just like the way that they worked in all of like the cyan light and the rocks spinning in place and the statues and all, the whole cosmic horror element of the bunker really felt kind of forced. Maybe it'll be more interesting once I've delved into the deep lore more, but it really just felt kind of on brand for Amnesia. So me personally, I'm not clamoring for the next game to be an Amnesia sequel or a Soma sequel. But I am indifferent on both of those things. So if they decide to do a sequel, I'll be okay with that as long as they use it to make something interesting. Just anything by Frictional that creates an interesting gameplay or a good story. As long as we get one or the other, I'll be happy. But yeah, I have been kind of back and forth in this review, but let's just wrap it up by saying that yes, I love this game very much. I'll definitely replay it. It is officially my third favorite Frictional game, with The Dark Descent and Soma being tied for first. The early hours of pondering in the hub, looking at my map, counting my fuel, planning my advance into the bunker were so fun and memorable that even though I didn't get the story I was hoping for, this game was very much a net positive. Oh, and this is also one of the scariest games that I've played in quite a while. I mean, like every review out that says this, but it's very true. It is a very scary game, and that may have even been one of their focuses. I don't know. I would be so happy to get like a developer doc or commentary for the bunker, so I can kind of hear what their thought processes were when making this game, because I'm very interested in that. I'm very, very interested in knowing what they were thinking about the bunker. Maybe if we could get some more insight into that, I could learn maybe what to expect in future games. Like, I know that Rebirth kind of got a lukewarm reception on GOG, for example, right? I really want to know how that affected their thought process for the bunker. What they may have learned from Rebirth. Did they regret any choices they made, or did they feel like that Rebirth was misunderstood in some way? Yeah, I'd love to know these things. I'm very interested. But I'm very happy that I played it. I'm very happy that Frictional exists. And even with the few games that didn't gel with me, I'm very much looking forward to what they have going on in the future. And I'm sure that, I'm sure that they won't all be necessarily winners from my perspective, but I'm still very thankful for Frictional and their existence. And I'm thankful for the bunker. And I very much look forward to what they do next. It is 8:12 p.m. Japan time, June 12th, 2023. My name is Jim, and thanks for listening.